Hello, world. This is the Know Your Place podcast, and this is episode 28. And I'm going to be talking about this week meals with family, or sort of what's it like when you go home and you visit your family for like the weekend or, maybe a week or two, and sort of how that looks different for me with my family from Wisconsin and the suburbs versus my in laws from Kentucky and in the rural areas. So stay tuned. Hello, Charles Aldendorf, and we're back here. So yes, I'm talking today about the differences between meals with family, and I don't necessarily know if this is a difference that's just because of a Wisconsin versus Kentucky thing, or suburban versus urban versus rural thing, but there's definitely a very sort of distinct difference I've noticed here. So my parents currently live in suburban Cincinnati, and that's where I went to high school, and that's where I come home to still, kind of, in a way. So they but they live, about 20 minutes outside of the downtown, so it's not necessarily like where they live is the urban core of Cincinnati. It kind of is and kind of isn't. And I bring this up because I'm going to contrast this a little bit to where my aunt and uncle live in a minute. So so they live out there, and when I go to visit them, or usually when I go home to visit them, it's kind of a tradition that we sort of go out. Sometimes I want to just say, just so my mom doesn't say that get all mad or something. No, sometimes they do actually cook a special meal for us. A special meal for me being home. But generally speaking, we all more enjoy going out to. We've always kind of enjoyed going out and trying a new restaurant or going back to a favorite restaurant of ours and having a big Saturday night meal out. Because usually when I go to visit my parents, it's a weekend experience, right? Or we go to a party of their friends, but we usually go have a dinner at a restaurant out. And why I bring this up is I wonder how prevalent that tradition is and where that sort of ties in regionally in the United States. So, because obviously, well, when I went to college, I met people from all over the state of Kentucky and all over the United States too. But going to the University of Kentucky, I did meet a lot of people who were, well, Kentuckians, and I noticed this tradition even before I met my in-laws, but uh, it really started when I was involved in sort of a church slash religious community, but it wasn't just this particular church that did this. Basically, there was a lot of times if you didn't go home for the weekend from college and you were part of a church, or even if you weren't part of a church, if you're part of some other campus organization, uh, you would go out and because Lexington is I guess it's got some kind of, I don't know how to describe it. It's 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 got Southern tradition, but it's not like Alabama Southern. It's like a different kind of Southern tradition, but there's old families there, and it's definitely an old money kind of town. And therefore, you meet people, and while there's lots of great restaurants in Lexington, I've been to lots of great restaurants in Lexington. Part of the tradition there, when you meet people and you meet their families, is you come over for dinner sometime, and they have a big Southern meal with this constant stereotypes. There's always mac and cheese and cornbread, and some kind of meat, often chicken, and there's pies and things like that, right? And so when I first experienced this, I was like, okay, so maybe this is just something people do that are part of the religious community. It's just like, well, we're all in the church together, so yeah, you're coming over as part of the church for this. Well, no, I think it's a Kentucky tradition. The religious element is there, but it's not the main driving factor behind it. And I say that because when I met my in-laws, they were very adamant on me having a meal. They came down, they made dinner on a weeknight for me and my wife, and every time when we come back there, it's very important to my mother-in-law that we're there on Saturday night and she makes a dinner for us, and that when we visit her, there's always a dinner made for us, and then sometimes even it's also important that when we have Sunday lunch that we either have it at my grandmother-in-law's house or my mother-in-law's house after church. And it's that's why I say the Saturday night thing I think is separate of being religious. It's just very important. It's not that we couldn't go out, like it has nothing to do with the fact that there's not any restaurants around or that they're too expensive or something like that, but it's just not how they do things. You wouldn't go out. You may go out for lunch, or you may bring something back for lunch after church, but you don't go Saturday night. You're there having dinner around the table. Like even me and my sister-in-law went to a couple of football games at the university. We still ate dinner at the house first and then went. That's the tradition, and that's what you do when your family comes into town for the weekend. Is they make the dinner, the big Saturday night dinner, and it's made in the house. So now to contrast that, so while I say my parents' tradition isn't always that, because we often go out, that is important to them if it's a holiday. If it's a holiday, somebody makes some food or something like Thanksgiving or the 4th of July you grill out, or Thanksgiving you have turkey, and so on and so forth. But I would say it was just my parents were this way, but when I go back to Wisconsin and meet my extended family, it's very similar. Now, when I go visit my aunt and uncle, they live in a more urban ring suburb of Milwaukee than my parents do of Cincinnati. It's a closer drive. It's been part of the urban area much longer. But my aunt, she will cook us a meal. She does want to cook us a dinner, but I usually stay for more days. And at some point, she always wants to go out and get something to eat. Not just because I think she's sick of cooking, because I don't really think it's that she cares too much about cooking. But it seems like it's also important to her to go out and try a new restaurant or try a familiar favorite and show. It's almost like you got to show it off to your relative. Like, hey, look, I discovered the new German restaurant over here, and we should all try it. Or, oh, let's go back to our favorite spot, the old fish place down by the lake. It's a tradition. And I guess this is what I think is a similar tradition to, well, it's a completely opposite tradition to Kentucky, but it's one that's the same kind of concept as what it's what you do. It's what you do on the Saturday night when someone visits you for the weekend. So yeah, and then also, I mean, and just to show that I don't think this is just an urban thing. When I would go visit my grandfather. Now, granted, my grandfather doesn't cook. Okay, let's be completely frank here. He doesn't cook. He doesn't need to cook. He has the money that he doesn't need to cook many meals at home, and doesn't care to. But he lives in a small town that's not right next to any big city. It's a city of 8,000, and whenever we visit him, he doesn't want to eat. We will eat a meal with him at his senior apartment sometimes, but generally speaking, he also has this kind of mentality that, like, "Oh, you've come to visit me for the weekend. It's Saturday night. Let's go try one of my favorite restaurant spots, or let's go try some new place you picked out that you say you want to try." It's again, I don't know, it's different mentality. It's you wouldn't just eat at his house. That's not what you do. But if we were down in, like I said, we're down at my in-laws, that would be what you would do. It'd almost be insulting if you suggested that you wanted to go out to eat somewhere. He'd be like, "What's wrong? My cooking's no good." You know, what's the deal here? So, and when my grandmother was still alive, even though she very much so enjoyed to cook and considered herself a gourmet chef and did cook many meals, she also was that way about the sort of Saturday evening meal that you're in town for the weekend. If you're in town for the weekend, we're gonna go eat out somewhere, and you see it when you're out there too. Like when you're out in Wisconsin, you're at one of these restaurants. It's all families, and it's usually you got 3 generations at least out, eating, trying out a place. And when I would be back in Kentucky, it'd be kind of different, right? I mean, sometimes you would see the 3 families are out thing, but usually in Lexington, you only see it in terms of like the parents are in town visiting the college kid for the weekend, not you're going out with your family because you're just hanging out with your family and going out to eat with your family. So it's I'm really curious if this is a thing in other countries in the world, and because this is what I would say a cultural regional difference thing. And I'm sure maybe in rural Wisconsin it's different. Maybe it's more like Kentucky, but I don't know. I really don't know, because the supper club tradition that I talked about in a different episode and have linked to the Splendid Table on there is a tradition in Wisconsin, a tradition of a family going out to a restaurant for a full meal, dinner, evening plan. It's been a tradition for several years. There's several of them left, and it's just a thing. So, but I'm curious how it is in other parts of the world. I would venture to guess in countries that are more urban that it would be more similar to Wisconsin than Kentucky, and perhaps in the more rural countries it would be similar to Kentucky. When I most of the stuff I have seen about English culture, I don't get the general vibe that they in the United Kingdom they would spend much time making at-home meals when their kids came back to town. But I could be wrong. I'd really like to have my stereotypes of countries shattered in the comments section, so I'm really curious to see what anyone turns up. As for other parts of America, I in the big cities, this is what's so weird though. It's kind of an ethnic thing in a way, I would say, because I've seen things of like Jewish families in New York. They don't go out to eat dinner, but perhaps if you were an Italian family in New York, yes, you would go out to the Italian restaurant with your whole family to show off, this is our whole family here. But then if you had an Italian wedding, of course, that's a totally another thing. You wouldn't. That's all in the family. That doesn't leave the family. And then of course I would venture to guess in California that people don't spend a lot of time. I don't know. California's a very weird place. There's all kinds of people. I don't know what the general attitude there is towards this cultural thing. So anyway, that's my episode for this week. Let me know in the comments section what you think. Does your family, when you come home, do they prepare a meal, or do they have some new spot they want to take you and show you off at, or how does that work for you all? Let me know. Thanks. Check out the Know Your Place podcast on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/knowyourplacepodcast, all one word, or on Facebook at facebook.com/knowyourplacepodcast, all one word. And we will be coming soon to YouTube and iTunes, and maybe another social media platform near you. Special thanks to my wife, Sarah, and Jay Graff for the riff.